Welcome to the KOMO Sports End Zone podcast with KOMO Sports Director Niko and Najee Moye.
Well, hey, it's been a little bit. Welcome to a special rapid reaction edition of the KOMO Sports End Zone. So what are we reacting to? Well, John Schneider took to the podium at the NFL Draft Combine in Indianapolis. This is something we hadn't seen, at least full comments from John, till really the end of the season and mid-season, and there's been a lot of changes. So it was really cool to hear John talk about everything from an admission that last offseason, they signed good football players on defense. They just weren't the best fit for Mike Macdonald's defense. And he applauded Mike Macdonald for being so direct in the way he communicates that they knew that they had to move on from these guys. And what a revelation that was, bringing aboard Ernest Jones IV, who was a game changer. And now the hope is that the Seahawks can lock him up long-term because he is a perfect fit for that Seahawks defense. But there was a lot of interesting stuff to come out of this. Probably the most noteworthy thing to come out of this is Geno Smith and the Seahawks are beginning to be engaged on contract extension talks. John made no mistake about it. Geno Smith is the guy in 2025. Let me know how you feel about that. We talked about that. Najee and I did a couple episodes ago, and 2025, it appeared he would be the guy. Now, I'm somebody that's more along the lines that the high interception number that we saw in 2024 was more a product of a real pass-heavy offense. Not that Ryan Grubb's a bad coordinator or something. Of course he's not. It's far from that. It's more along the lines of they were oftentimes in a situation where they were throwing 40, 50 times a game, at least 30 some odd times. And we know the identity of the Seahawks is about running the football. So, and at least controlling the line of scrimmage and helping out Mike Macdonald's defense. So with that in mind, I think the scheme had something to do with Geno's high interception rate. All of that said, I thought he would definitely be the guy in 2025. If you remember that episode, if you are new to us, hey, check it out. And thanks for watching and listening to this one. But the answer came down to, well, who else are you going to get to be your starter? I mean, it's either Geno, a savvy veteran with some tread, no question still on the tires, or you're probably getting, there's a rookie potentially you have to trade up to get. That doesn't sound terribly appealing unless you're getting one of the real game changers. And then the question really becomes, what are you giving up to move up that high from number 18 in your current spot? And the current free agent pool is Sam Darnold, I suppose, is noteworthy, but he had one good year. Is that sustainable? But John kind of, flushing all that away. Geno's the guy in 2025. The two sides will sit down starting in the next week to hammer out a potential contract extension. Now, John didn't say like, oh yeah, we're going to make it happen. He said, let's see, essentially what's there and if it's a right fit for both sides. So keep an eye on that. As we go into the NFL Combine, we're getting closer and closer to that new league year, first week of March. And that's when free agency starts. That's when trades can become official. If you might remember, the Seahawks traded Russell Wilson and they couldn't officially announce it, even though everybody in the world knew about it. They couldn't officially announce it for a couple days. And so that's the idea there. Some other things John brought up. I was so glad this came up. Somebody asked about the status of DK and he said, well, what about him? Like, he's on our team. He scoffed at the notion that DK Metcalf would be moved. Now, two observations on that I'd like to pass on. Number one, like, of course he's going to say that. Because I think those are just internet rumors. I mean, that's just my opinion on it. I don't think the Seahawks are anywhere remotely thinking about moving DK Metcalf. You want Geno Smith to succeed? You keep DK Metcalf there. You want to credit at least part of Jackson Smith and Jigba's emergence? You factor in the attention that DK Metcalf takes from opposing defenses, right? So that's an important thing to note in this, all of that. But hey, with all that said, they once scoffed at the notion of trading Russell. Different scenario. That was that was made and discontent for a couple of years. I think DK's here to stay. He likes it here. The Seahawks like him as well. One thing I thought was important too, John Schneider said this is one of the deepest running back NFL draft classes that he's seen in some time. And that's significant. Now the Seahawks would appear on paper set at that position, Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. However, Kenneth Walker has had some major health issues. It's been really at times a struggle to stay on the field. And is Zach Charbonnet running back one? I think he's shown flashes of that potential. Do I think the Seahawks are going to use a first round to pick on it? No. That's for a later episode. I think they'll be using that first round pick, whether it's on the offensive line or, as we know, John doesn't like to use that high of a capital on it. I think if they don't go that route, I think they further invest in this defense. You got a defensive head coach that really worked wonders once he got his guy Ernest Jones in there. Imagine you bring in another linebacker. Maybe you bring in got another safety. I mean, the possibilities are endless in that regard. So my gut says they're going to go defense in that 18th pick. Certainly not running back, but I wouldn't rule out. And what I would want them personally to do is to draft some help on that offensive line. So those are the headlines. The status about Geno Smith scoffing at DK Metcalf, and the fact that he said it's one of the deepest running back classes that he's seen in a while. Now, that's the caveat to all this. Between running back, and this also holds true for defensive tackle, it's a really, really deep draft. So if you're the Seahawks, you can use that first-round capital on best available, regardless of position, and still address positions you feel are of need, say using a second-round pick on the defensive line, or say using a third-round pick at the running back spot. So there's a lot of opportunity there when it comes moving forward. He talked about Clint Kubiak having a lot of experience. That's one of the things in my notes here that I really thought was important. And the Seahawk way, they're going to draft the best player, but that also has to match their character as well. So that's really cool to see. One note I want to pass along from the great Bob Condotta of the Seattle Times. He was on the same flight to Indianapolis as John Schneider, Mike McDonald, the Seahawks staff, but also Pete Carroll. Pete still lives here. And apparently, as Bob says, they were talking on the plane ride. All love here. Pete Carroll, even in his press conference that he held at Indianapolis, he took some questions from Seattle reporters. He talked about how much he loves Seattle. He was surprised even by his impact and his legacy here in town. He plans on maintaining his residence that he has in the area. A lot of people will tell you that he spent his 1 year off, so to speak, watching a lot of football, but also going to a lot of grandchildren. And in the case of his son, when he was at UW at the time, going to some of his games on Montlake. Of course, his son is now joining him with the Raiders in Vegas. So that was really cool to see that they had a little bit of a get together on the plane, the direct flight from Seattle to Indy. But yeah, so it's going to be interesting to look at the road forward. What do the Seahawks do in free agency? What positions do they address in free agency? Certainly, I think many of you agree is the offensive line has to be upgraded. There's no two ways about it. The question becomes, do you do that in free agency? Do you do that in the draft? How much do they invest? Do they go get one of the biggest names out there, whether it's the draft or free agency, or do they, as we've known, John Schneider doesn't like to invest a ton, at least in the interior offensive line. They have their left tackle, Charles Cross, who was awesome in 2024. On paper, they have the right tackle set with Abraham Lucas, but of course the injuries have been a problem. He appears to be at full health now, even if he missed that last game, but he was out for about a full year with that knee injury. So, if the Seahawks medical staff, which only they and Abe know how, concerning it is going forward, but that'll determine if they address the tackle spot as well. No question about it. And you have to address it. So it's a question of free agency or the draft. It's going to be a really interesting few weeks. So here on the KOMO Sports End Zone, non-rapid reaction addictions coming up in the weeks to come. We're going to talk about free agency wish lists. We're going to talk about hopefully locking up Ernest Jones to a really nice contract. And we'll talk about the talks with Geno Smith as they unfold. And then, of course, everybody's favorite subject, mock drafts here in Seattle, the quarterback situation elsewhere outside of Seattle. And what do you do? Because even if you extend Geno, at some point, you need to have a succession plan. And how worried are they about that? How much does that register on their radar, having a succession plan? Now, if you ask them, they're going to say Sam Howell. Is Sam Howell really the answer? I think that would leave a lot of fans something to be desired. So that's why I say there needs to be a succession plan in place. So a lot of fun stuff to talk about. Great to join you for this rapid reaction edition of the KOMO Sports End Zone. Make sure you check us out, especially during the season every week, but about every other week now when we break down everything going on in the Seahawks world. John Schneider's comments all about DK's here to stay. Geno is the guy, a very deep running back class, and how they move forward in free agency and the draft.